Hi, I'm Gus.
And I'm Henry.
And we are not alive!
Neither are a lot of the poor robots we encountered in Liam Vickers' awesome indie animation, Murder Drones.
I mean, the title really says it all. There are drones, some of them murder, some of them are murdered by other drones, really.
It's true, you got to appreciate that kind of commitment to truth in advertising.
Exactly, some titles just lie. The Lion King? Where's his crown?
No, you're so right. We should sue Disney for that.
We should sue Disney for a lot of reasons.
It's true.
Everyone should sue Disney.
This is a show that Gus and I grievously slept on. I think while we were watching it and messaging each other, I literally sent you a message that was like, oh, I feel like such a fool for not watching this earlier. But at the same time, not watching it straight away gave us the benefit of having 5 really cool episodes to watch basically as soon as we got into it.
This show, it has a solid pilot in terms of the bones of establishing the premise, establishing the main character, the stakes, the world, all of that. But then the way it builds on that premise and uses both its serialized elements and its character development to keep that story engine running, it means that the more episodes are out of this quality, the more anyone who's getting into it is going to have a lot to look forward to.
It's so true, man. It's so true. And we're going to try to apply some structure to our thoughts on this. There's inevitably going to be some gushing because just like oil gushes out of a robot that's been cleft in twain by a murder drone.
Those insidious murder drones. They can't stop murdering.
What's the premise of this show, Gus, for anyone who is vaping along with us at home?
This is set in a spacefaring future where humanity has colonized the stars, and on one exoplanet, the worker droids are left over after a nuclear winter destroyed all of the humans. The worker drones live underground in fear of disassembly drones, or as they're colloquially known to the worker drones, the murder drones. Hijinks ensue.
I think this is a show where, there are so many interesting talking points about it, but weirdly what I want to kind of start on before we jump into the characters, which, from a cursory look at the fandom, we know that's what people are really here for, and believe us, we love them too. I find it personally really, really interesting that this is a show that is pretty clean. To the best of my knowledge, there's no swearing, no real sexual content, and despite the fact that a lot of pretty horrific violence occurs to these adorable little robots, because it's all robots being dismembered and it's not blood, it's oil, it kind of has the Genndy Tarkovsky Samurai Jack escape clause of it can be really violent without feeling really violent.
This is a versatile show, and part of that versatility is the fact that these characters, of which there are many and of which all of them are pretty lovable, they are all based on a very similar murder drone-specific robot design body plan that is infinitely versatile both within the show and within the fan works that we were observing.
Even when you were making the thumbnail for this video, Gus, when you searched up, the first things you saw were not official art of the show, but just oodles of fan art, and I think anything that can whip people up like that is worth a look. So, to get a little bit into the characters, our main protagonist here, and she is a great one, is Uzi, voiced by the wonderful YouTube singer and voice actor Elsie Lovelock, who, if I'm not mistaken, I believe is British, so it's really impressive that she was able to sustain such a, believable American accent during this kind of versatile performance.
Yeah, and so Uzi is a really good protagonist, as you said, because the entire pilot episode revolves around her literally, kick-starting the events of the series. There was a sort of stasis period between the backstory of this, where, the disassembly drones and the worker drones were completely separate, and Uzi ends up sort of smashing down that barrier because she wants to see what's, out there beyond those walls.
Yeah, and I think it's because Uzi is a character who has such a defined personality, such a defined worldview, that they really make you understand from early on, it's this, very consistent internal core that drives her to be constantly, taking initiative, being proactive, making decisions, and as a result, she's this highly active character who always pushes the plot forward rather than kind of being dragged, because this is honestly a problem not just in indie animation, but I think in storytelling as a whole. I don't know how this kind of got out there, but there are a lot of people who mistakenly believe that, like, your main character, in order to be more quote-unquote relatable to the audience, should be a little bit meek, a little bit bland, a little bit just milquetoast, so that the audience can very easily transpose themselves on it, and then the ensemble cast around them get to be more interesting. And I think shows that don't fall into that trap, like Murder Drones, are inherently more compelling to watch, because when you've got a main character who cares and who feels very deeply and who has, like, strong opinions, you kind of feel those with them.
Yeah, and to wit, Uzi is just oozing with a very specific goth, edgy personality. But the show doesn't just kind of like let her like do that with no consequences. It constantly makes fun of her for being like a try-hard, edgy teen in a way that like you can tell that this was written by an adult who has like grown out of behaviors like this.
Yeah, no, it's so true. It's so true. And I think offsetting the energy we get from Uzi wonderfully is our kind of co-main character or secondary protagonist, N, one of the murder drones who is not like the others and is played to perfection by the inimitable Michael Kovac.
Yeah, and you know what's really funny too is that, like, remember Rocky from Lackadaisy, who is also voiced by Michael Kovac? Nothing like this character. He kind of steals the show by being the exact opposite of what you would think of when you would think of the personality of something that is like designed to disassemble and murder and disembowel. He's kind of a goofy, nice boy. He's a Labrador retriever of a robot.
They have that perfect, like, yin and yang duo dynamic that I think, when done right, is, like, completely irresistible, because Uzi is a character who, you know, in terms of fighting, she is undeniably competent, and her intelligence boosts this, like the fact she builds her, like, cool rail gun. But what's so fun is the fact that as a murder drone, N has, like, all of these inherent, like, weapons and, like, combat abilities that when they sort of work together, she's able to use him as, like, a tool in the fights that they both have, and it's something that makes for really, like, satisfying engagements. A big part of that impression is because they have